Okay, we are now live.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting for the Township of Georgian Bay for Friday, September 17, 2021. My name is Tom Hill, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. Before we begin, this morning there's a public meeting scheduled for 1 consent and 5 minor variance applications. I'll briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized today. The Secretary Treasurer will advise the committee of when, how, and to whom notice of each of the hearings was circulated for the applications being considered. Next, each of the applications will be considered separately. Planning staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the applications and provide any other information that is relevant. The Secretary Treasurer will summarize the correspondence on file. And from there, the applicant may make a brief presentation if they so choose, and the public will have an opportunity to speak to the applications as well. From there, the applications following the public forum will be taken to the committee to deliberate on the whether to consider a motion to pass, defeat, or defer the decision for the applications. The applications being considered this morning are B21-07 for 151 Portage Road, consent application. The minor variance applications being considered this morning are A2109 for 188 Lodge Road, A21-16 for 21 Links Trail, A21-17 for 350 Birch Acres Drive, A21-20 for 377 North Shore Road, and A21-21 for 237 Winding Way. At this point, I would ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. And let's just see. All right, I have to change my view here so I can see everyone. Okay, and again, I'll just ask, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. I have a motion to adopt the agenda for today's meeting, moved by Member Demkew and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. And do we, our first application will be a consent application B20.
I just have to say my piece about my Secretary Treasurer piece.
Yes, please go ahead.
Notice of each of the applications was sent by first class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
Thank you, Marcia. Before we bring in that consent application, do we have the applicant online? I don't see anyone other than the members. There's Brad.
Good morning, committee. We're just having a couple of technical issues bringing people over, so if we could just pause for a couple of minutes, we'll bring the applicant and all those who have registered to speak over and into the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that, committee. I'm going to, if the chair is okay with it, I will do my presentation, and then Sydney will coordinate bringing everybody in if that works for the chair.
Yeah, is that going to be suffice for the applicants that we do a presentation of their application without them present?
Yeah, so everybody will still be able to see and hear everything that's going on. They just won't be able to speak, but that's fine because that portion comes up after the planner's presentation.
Oh, so they were able to hear and
Yep.
see us at this point. Okay.
Yep.
So I guess then we'll dispense at this point with a description of how our proceeding will take place. They may have heard that already.
Yeah, if you haven't said that piece yet, then you still will need to, but if you have, then I can start with the presentation.
Well, when did the applicants get logged in? Just now?
They've been in for the whole meeting. It's just right now they're attendees in the meeting, so they don't have the ability.
All right, then we're good to go. Thank you, Brad. Please proceed.
All right, I'm just going to bring up the presentation here. If I could just get a thumbs up if the presentation is on screen. Perfect. All right, so the first application this morning for public meeting is consent application B2107. The applicant is Mary and William Holden. The agent is Marilyn Gidgey. And the lands are located at 151 Portage Road on Baxter Lake. So an overview of the application is that it proposes to establish a private right-of-way over 151 Portage Road, which contains a portion of Portage Road, to provide legal access to the adjacent lands at 346 Portage Road. This application would not result in the creation of a new lot. So here we have a location map showing the subject and benefiting lands. The subject lands are shown in gray. These are the lands that contain Portage Road and the existing private driveway that the right-of-way is proposed to be established over. And the benefiting lands are shown in red, being 346 Portage Road, which the right-of-way would be in favor of. Here we have the 2018 aerial imagery, so you can see the outline of 151 Portage Road in the light blue color with the proposed route for the right-of-way shown in red, which does utilize the existing private road and the existing driveway off of Portage Road in this location here. Whoops. So there is no site alteration or tree removal required to establish the private road. All of the site alteration has already been completed, and that's existing. So none is proposed through this application. So just an overview of Development Services Report 2021-66. Staff are recommending approval of the application subject to the recommended conditions, as no new site alteration or development are proposed as a result of the application, and it is to legalize existing access over the private road and driveway. So planning staff are of the opinion that the application conforms to and does not conflict with any of the applicable planning policy documents, and are recommending approval subject to these conditions here, which are that taxes be paid, a legal description be provided to scope where the right-of-way is to be registered, a copy of the in preparation draft deed be provided to the Secretary Treasurer for review. Any fees and disbursements incurred by the municipality would be the responsibility of the applicant, and that the conditions be satisfied within 1 year. So that is all I have in terms of a presentation for the committee regarding this application. The applicant, their agent, and their solicitor are all in attendance this morning. If they have anything further to add, or if the committee has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Madam Secretary, do you have any correspondence on this application?
2 letters of no objection were received from the District of Muskoka and Hydro One. 2 letters of objection were received from Hillary Garbins and Michael Van Pelt on behalf of Andrew and Joanne Nevin.
Thank you very much. I see the applicant is present. Is there anything that you would care to add to what the planners provided so far? I think you may be muted. You want to check the lower left-hand corner and
Hello, can you hear me now?
there we are. Yes, we hear you
Yeah,
now.
thank you. Sorry, I do lots of Zoom calls, but this has been a unique one where I was sitting there watching some of you gentlemen talk about when your families bought islands and so forth, and I couldn't get through to you that I couldn't speak. So I'm happy to be heard. Thank you for explaining the process. The lady sitting to my left, which I hope you can see, is Marilyn Giddy, and she has been the owner of the property that benefits from the road with her common law spouse, and before that through her common law spouse since the 1950s. I see that the Holdens, who actually own the land that the road is over, are also on the line. And this may be a little confusing in that normally the applicant is the one doing the talking. They have a very capable lawyer named Mr. Ed Velboom. He has suggested that we, as the people who want to benefit from this right-of-way, prepare and run the application with the consent of his clients, the Holdens. And so that's why you're suffering my voice, is because I represent Marilyn Giddy, who is listed on the application as the agent, as opposed to the applicant. And the Holdens, who own the land the right-of-way is going to go over, are listed as the applicant. Hope that makes some kind of sense.
Yes,
So,
that's great.
I think that Brad did a great job of explaining what's going on, but I did have access to the comments that were sent to the committee, and I just want to address those very high level down. 1962, the road was built. People who owned the land at that time was a gentleman named Joseph King. In 1965, he entered into a right-of-way with a fellow who owned a company called Prentice Road and Excavating, giving a right-of-way to come from the public highway over the lands that the Holdens now own to get to a cottage, which is now about where my client's cottage is. Over the years, a series of surveys detailing the existence of the right-of-way in various shapes and sizes are filed, with 1966 being the filing of a plan BR 904, which shows a part 2. And the only reason I detail that is because one of the people who wrote in has some concerns about an encroachment on the right-of-way, and that part is the part that we'll be talking about if in fact he addresses that. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that. Giddy built their cottage, or Mr. Little, who was the original, the spouse of Mrs. Giddy, the common law spouse, in the 1960s. The cottage hasn't moved. The right-of-way number 2 hasn't moved. So the granting of this right-of-way really doesn't change anything other than it gives her legal title to drive over the land. She has been paying road association dues since there was a road association to maintain this road, which I gather happened in about 1992. In fact, her common law husband, Mr. Little, was the guy who formed the road association to collect the dues to maintain the road. So there's a significant history of her driving over this road to get to her cottage. In more recent years, and I believe you have the survey that's been done most recently, the Holdens had the road resurveyed. And when I look at the difference between the new survey and the old one, there's a slight change at the curve of the road that wasn't there before. So just for detail's sake on the record, there was a plan 35R2597 that was filed in 1972 showing the road in from the highway that people use to get to my client's lot, or their lots, because there are about 10 families that use this road, as I understand it. That could be wrong. The Holdens may have better information on that, but as I understand, 10 cottage families have been using this road historically to get to their lots, my client being one of them. Anyhow, in, I should have worn my glasses, 1982, a new survey is done, Plan 35R8246, and if we compared the two, The width of the right-of-way at the top has been widened, and there's a slight curve that didn't exist before. But essentially, the same road has been used for 60 years by people to get to their cottage, my client being one of them. The applicants have told my client they would like her to purchase a legal registered right-of-way. We would like to do that, and we're happy to answer any questions you have. But that's the history. Nothing is changing here. No new buildings, no new dwellings. It's just we're getting registered title to a road that we've been driving over for 60 years.
Thank you very much. That does add a lot of clarity to the application. I would ask if there's any member of the public who wishes to address the committee or add comments at this time. I see Michael Van Pelt. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two comments. Number one, the note I made to the municipality via Brad, I appreciate the opportunity to do that on behalf of my elderly parents-in-law. The concerns that I express is, number one, a question around just the application being premature. And I think there's two reasons for that. The number one reason is that the existing right-of-way is encumbered. I think we need to acknowledge that. And I would suggest that the committee consider the fact that their decision here may impact that reality. My parents are not concerned about the present moment. They have a long-standing relationship with Marilyn, and that's always been a positive one. Our concern, obviously, is that you are not making decisions for the present moment. You are making decisions for the future. And this right away, let's be clear, is actually encumbered and is occupied. And it may be that we need to write in or figure out a way to deal with that issue, knowing that your decision actually affects the future. Second of all, we have not been privy. I think we're the only ones that have actually a right of way to that driveway section, which Marilyn would be added to then. We have not had our opportunity to see what kind of agreement exists there. And by your making this decision would have an impact on what that agreement looks like. And it probably is worth a sharing of that agreement to ensure that there is no further encumbrance coming on that right away due to the agreement between Holden and between Maryland. So my point is more a question around the premature timing of this application and our concern, obvious concern for the future than any specific concerns for the present. So thank you very much for the opportunity to just highlight those concerns for the committee as they consider their decision.
Thank you, Mr. Van Pelt. I would go back to planning. And Brett, are you in a position to address the question of the current encumbrance, or is that something that we need to do some more investigation into?
To the chair, I would maybe defer the question to Mr. McClellan. I don't know if he has any comments regarding the encumbrance on that right of way.
Go ahead, Mr.
Gentlemen, I'd be happy to comment on that if it helps at all. There are two things I think in Mr. Van Pelt's summation that I'd like to address succinctly. One is that I have a copy of the agreement of purchase and sale here, and while I don't think it's any of the neighbor's business what my client is paying to get the right of way, and I don't think the Holdens want to share what they're charging people for the right of way, the part that he's talking about is not really the access road, part 1 on the new survey that we're getting. It's this old part 2 on plan 3R09 from back in the 60s. And the survey part 3R, part 2 on plan 3R09 shows a tiny strip from the road into the lake. In other words, it's not an access road that you drive over. And it describes it as a portage point. And although the mists of time have gone by and not so many people take canoes across the lake anymore, The purpose of it, I'm told, I wasn't there when it was done, was so that people taking a canoe across the lake had a way to access through this land to get to another side, and portage, as it were. That's why they wrote portage. Now, my client has been beside that right of way for 60 years. And in that time, no one has ever complained that the location of her deck, which encroaches by 0.447 of a meter onto a 20-meter portage route, has interfered with them being able to portage. And in fact, I'm told by my clients that people from the subdivision use it to launch boats, although that wasn't the original purpose. And that all the years they've lived there, nobody, including the Holdens, who are the people who have the right to enforce the, moving the encroachment, have ever approached them about it, complained about it, said it was interfering with them. And so I have to say that this is really not a material concern because it hasn't affected anybody using the subdivision in 60 years. I've had a discussion with Mr. Veldboom, the solicitor for the Holdens, and I said to him, maybe we should address this encroachment now and get it done with. And he suggested that his clients, and I don't want to misspeak, but would prefer not to, because if somebody buys my client's land and wants to redevelop it, wants to build a bigger cottage or a newer cottage, they want the right to say, no, you have to move it off of this encroachment if they choose to do so. So I believe, and I've spoken to Mr. Oster about this, and I think he agrees, that the committee granting my client the right to buy this strip to get into their property in no way binds the hands of the municipality to prohibit anyone building further on this footprint, and in no way endorses the encroachment as it is. And since the applicant who owns the land is fine with it, and we're fine with it, and nobody who lives in the subdivision has complained about it in 60 years, I really think it's a bit of a red herring. And the second thing was, what is the land to be used for? And I'm going to read to you, and I apologize for reading because it's probably the last thing you want on a Friday morning, but just want to read to you very shortly what the use of the right-of-way is for to satisfy the second concern. The transferee agrees that the use of the property will be for vehicular and pedestrian travel related only to the residential use of the dominant land. And as a lawyer, I was taught that the dominant lands are Mrs. Giggy's cottage and the servient lands are the lands the right-of-way is on, which you probably already know. For clarity, this right-of-way shall not be used to access the dominant lands where the dominant lands are used in whole or part for purposes or acts of waterfront landing or to provide access to any water access lots or water access lands. That then is complemented by a second paragraph that says that the transferee, my client, acknowledges that if the Holdens want to redevelop their waterfront landing, they can go to court and do it, and my client won't object. Those are the only things granted in the agreement, a right to drive over the road back and forth, which they've been doing for 60 years anyhow. There's no other use, there's no other thing. So again, I think that addresses the two concerns you've mentioned. As far as premature, it's been going on for 60 years, so there's nothing premature about getting it put to bed in writing. My client, as spry and young as she is, at some point is going to find that she doesn't need her cottage anymore, and when she goes to sell it, there's the potential that the people who own it could say, well, the new people don't have any right to use that cottage. We've been letting you use it because we like you or because of some verbal license that was granted 60 years ago, but you don't have any written access to the cottage. That would landlock the cottage and really drive down its marketability and its value, and that's not really fair to my client. So I hope that addresses the comment made by Mr. Van Pelt.
Okay, that does add some clarity. Mr. Van Pelt, you had some further comment there?
Yes, and then I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much, sir, for your number one, your disclosure on the portion of the detailed agreement. Of course, I or my parents-in-law are not at all interested in whatever financial arrangements you've made. So that's also not relevant here. But I do appreciate that disclosure. So I think the real issue still at hand here, and I'll leave it at that, is the decision that you're have to make in front of you is no matter what the nature of the right-of-way is, it's a right-of-way that is presently encumbered, and your decision to acknowledge that gives further opening to that. Obviously, we are not concerned with the present, with Maryland's present ownership. That's been going on for many, many years. But the world changes, and we're going to see new ownership at some point in time in the future. No one knows when, but the implications for your decision there is very substantial. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. I did notice another member of the public at one point. Is there anyone else that wishes to provide comment? I see Hillary MacArthur. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hear you.
Okay. So thank you, Michael. And I just wanted to point out with regards to the granting of the right-of-way, not
Pardon me,
necessarily.
Ms. MacArthur, could you, by way of introduction, tell us who you are and how you are connected with this application?
Oh, I apologize. So my name is Hillary MacArthur. I have a residence at 312 Portage Road. So essentially I'm neighbors to Marilyn. There's a vacant strip of land between us, but essentially we're neighbors on Portage Road. So that's how I'm involved in this. And I guess my concerns with regards to the right-of-way, we're not necessarily opposed to the right-of-way. We're just worried about the domino effect that it would cause if it were to be granted. I just want to point out the lawyer for Marilyn mentioned if she decides to sell the cottage in the future, it has been listed for sale pretty much all summer long. The reason why I did not sell, I'm assuming, I'm also a real estate agent, so I was privy to the information of the listing, is because essentially it is landlocked or island access cottage because the right-of-way wasn't in place. So saying that going forward, our concerns is that when it is relisted, because I'm assuming it will be, and that's her right, everyone's right to do that, that as many cottages or on the lake have become Airbnbs with increased traffic, 6, 7, 10 people staying in a cottage. And our concern is the current septic situation of her property. And then if the right-of-way was granted, and with the increased traffic, the seepage into the lake. I've spoken with several residents of the lake that have been there for many, many, many years. And I guess the concern is the older septic, now correct me if I'm wrong, is a holding tank that goes into a leaching bed. And due to the fact that her property is low-lying and it does flood, especially in heavy rains, we're concerned about the septic leaking into the lake with the excess usage that would probably come with the property being sold. Hence the right-of-way, if it's granted, all this would kind of take place. So that was our concerns. I don't know what your recommendations are, what anyone's thoughts are on the committee, if that plays into the right-of-way, if that's a whole nother section of the township that I need to go and address. But that's just why I wanted to be here today and express concerns.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarity, the impact of the septic system is not something that's in the purview of the Committee of Adjustment. You would contact the building department at the Township of Georgian Bay with any concerns in that area. And you mentioned the domino effect, and I'm not really clear on what you're inferring with that domino effect. Is it the septic domino effect, or is it something else?
Well, I mean, my thought process is the right-of-way is granted, the property goes up for sale, it's sold, it becomes an Airbnb, and every week you have, 6 people coming, staying, using the septic gets overloaded.
Yeah, that's again, I'm sorry, but that's
where you're building. Okay. Nope,
yeah, that's really not that's a guess at what may happen in the future. And
right.
what we're addressing here pretty straightforward, is the granting of the right of way itself. So appreciate your comments, and certainly a concern. Always good to see that the neighbors are involved in any changes like this. So appreciate you joining us today and giving us your comments. Again, I would ask, are there any other members of the public who wish to address the committee at this point? Okay, seeing none. I have in front of me a motion.
Excuse me, Chair Hill.
Yes.
There's a Mr. or Mrs. Holden who have their hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't see that. Still don't see that.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Please go ahead, Ms. Holden.
I just wanted to mention, talking to my lawyer, Mr. Balboon, he was saying this is probably to maybe kind of answer Michael Van Pelt part of his concerns. In future, if there's any future renovations or building, at that point, they would be asked to move the corner of the cottage and part of the deck off of our property, off the right of way.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I understood that from the comments that Mr. McClellan made earlier, and that seemed to make a lot of sense. That if there's going to be future development, that would encumbrance would be taken into consideration.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. If I can't see any other hands up, so if there are no other public comments, I will close the public section of the application and bring the application before the committee for questions or comments. And we will begin with Member Jarvis.
Pardon me if I've been totally confused by this whole scenario. Brad, I'm hoping you can clear a few things up for me. Are we talking about the whole road or just part of the road?
Through the chair to Member Jarvis, it is a portion of the road. It's most of the road that's contained within 151 Portage Road that the right of way is proposed to go over, and then there's a small driveway section off of Portage Road down to the property. So what I can do is I can share
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
presentation just so we have a visual. So Portage Road comes in through here.
Yes.
And the right of way is proposed to start at this location here at the beginning of 151 Portage Road and follow that up along this red line up through here. And then this offshoot here is the private driveway portion that the right of way is also to be established over.
So what's the difference between a right of way versus what is currently in place?
So what's currently in place, there is nothing currently in place for 346 Portage Road. They do not have legal registered access in terms of a right of way to use those lands to access their property. And this application proposes to legalize that access to allow them to legally use Portage Road and that driveway extension to access their property.
So the other residents along that road do have legal access then? They do have right-of-way access?
I can't speak to confirming that they all have legal access, but it is my understanding that a number of the properties along this road do have a right-of-way currently over Portage Road to get into, their properties along theirs.
Okay. And then now I better understand things. Thank you very much, Brad. I've been directing myself towards Mr. Van Pelt, and I'm having trouble understanding his concerns with regards to use or future use of this. The road is still a private road, So nothing's changed in that context. The cottage owners, as has been explained to us already, have an association that looks after the road. That's been explained to us. So I'm having trouble understanding Mr. Van Pelt's concerns. I don't see him there. Can you help me there, Brad, as well?
I'm just looking to see if Mr. Van Pelt is still in the meeting. I would prefer that if you have questions of his concerns, that he be present to speak to them, but I don't see that he's in attendance in the
Yeah.
meeting any longer.
Bad connection. Technology today, it's lovely. Okay, well I'm not seeing too many issues with this other than the fact that somebody's just getting legal right to something they've been using for a while, as it's been explained to us. So at the moment, I have no issues with this, but thank you very much for your indulgence.
Okay, thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Ferguson. And you're muted, Mike.
I agree with the comments made by a member Jarvis. I think some of the objections that were brought up here, for example, future use of the cottage have no bearing. And the fact if there is a bad septic system currently on the land, then simply get in touch with the building department and request an inspection, which would solve those problems. I think that, as we've seen many times in the past, oftentimes where there's a road that services many cottages, the owners get together and they all apply at the same time for legal access to drive over the property. And I'm surprised maybe more of that could have been done here, but overall I'm in favor from all I have seen of this application.
Thank you, Member Demkew. And we can't hear you, Bill.
You're on unmute. You're not muted, Bill, but your computer microphone may be off.
Yeah. Yeah, Bill, you're frozen partially as well.
When he's turning a sickly color, I'm worried about him.
Yeah, Bill, I think what we'll do is if you could contact us by phone, then I'll attempt to bring you back in just a little bit later, if that's all right. So we'll move from Mr. Demkew to Mr. Caddo.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this. This has been here for many years. And I know the neighbors are worried about the future, but no one knows what the future holds. Their place might get sold and turned to Airbnb. So no one can predict the future, what's going to happen. And I definitely don't have a problem with this application.
Okay, thank you. Member Kuchar.
Thank you, Chair Hill. A couple of things. One is, as some of you know, I'm all too familiar with easements or right-of-ways over private lanes. And I don't have concern about the application for legalizing a right-of-way that's been exercised for 60 odd years, if I understand it correctly. I want to make a couple of observations. One is, as already been mentioned, if there is concern about the septic system, the neighbor should feel free to contact the building department and they will arrange for an inspection. And what consequences of the inspection will be, I can't say, but that is quite independent of the application for legalizing a right-of-way. Secondly, to the concern expressed by, I believe, Ms. MacArthur in regards to Airbnb and further activity and all that. Council discussed this somewhat actively back on Monday and have asked staff to look into what rules or regulations we should put in around Airbnb. And I'm not sure where that research or discussion will end up, but it is a concern that's been expressed by a fair number of people in the township in regard to Airbnbs and the effect that they can have on some neighborhoods. So that is being addressed by staff and council. Though again, that's quite independent of, in my mind, of this particular application. And so as far as this application is concerned, I do not have any issue with this issuing the, or legalizing, if you will, the right-of-way that is currently being enjoyed. But I do have a couple of questions for Mr. Oster. This is only a portion of Portage Road. Do you know if the entire road is private or is a portion of it public? Like, you know, there's a bit of a leg going up the Portage Road that is not included in this application. I'm just curious if you have any further information on that.
So through the chair to Member Kutsier, the portion of Portage Road that comes off of the municipal road goes over Crown land. So it's my understanding that they don't need to establish a right of way to use that portion. So that's why this right of way is just going over what is the privately owned portion, being 151 Portage Road.
And then subsequent to that, if I may, Chair Hill, is any portion of Portage Road municipally maintained?
I believe there is a small portion that is mapped as being municipally maintained, but I would, in our system, it shows it as there's a small portion right off of the district road that is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Member Kuchar, and I acknowledge your question there regarding the first section of Portage Road. It seems to have been upgraded substantially, and that there is a turnaround there before you start into the property that we're discussing here today. Member Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think I really have anything to add that hasn't already been said by our fellow committees. I thank Mr. Kuchar for his input, because that was going to be one of my questions, if he could guide some light on this similar matter. I guess my only question really is the other cottages that are along that road I'm just curious why they wouldn't have jumped onto this right of way as well. But that's their business and not mine, I guess. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Matthews. And Member Demke, we can see you clearly. Let's see if we can hear you. Your lips are moving, but no voice is coming out. However, you've heard all of the input, Member Demke, and I believe you will still. Yes, you'll be able to use your thumb to vote. So,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Oster had his hand up. Perhaps he had a point of clarity.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Oster.
I just wanted to let Bill know if he wanted to call me. If he has comments to make, he's welcome to give me a call and I can loop him in that way. Do you have any comments that you wanted to add, Bill? No?
He gave us a thumbs up, so we should be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
We will, we can still accept his vote. So I have a motion before me, actually moved by Member Caddo. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment hereby grants provisional approval to the consent application B21-07 as advertised, subject to the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes are paid to date. B, a reference plan of the consent shall be prepared and duly registered by Ontario Land Surveyor, and one copy filed with the Secretary Treasurer of the committee. A draft copy of the reference plan shall be provided to the Secretary Treasurer for review and approval prior to registration on title, if applicable. C, a copy of the electronic registration in preparation draft deed for the right-of-way, if applicable, shall be provided to the Secretary Treasurer of the committee, together with a signed acknowledgement and direction so that the consent certificate may be issued. D, that all fees and disbursements, legal, engineering, and planning, if any, occurred by the township with respect to this application shall be paid for by the owner. And E, the conditions set out herein shall be completed with 1 year within 1 year of the date of the decision of the committee. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. And thank you for your attendance to that application. And we'll just wait a moment here and make sure we our next group of applicants has a opportunity to get connected. Are we getting those connection issues resolved, Mr. Oster?
Yes, we are working on it. We're just bringing everybody over presently. Our planning consultants did the next application, so they'll have a presentation for the committee as well.
Okay. I typically can see all of the participants, and for some reason today we're just seeing some. So anyway, I appreciate those who have taken the opportunity to point out when somebody's raised their hand, and let's continue to do that. At this point, I do see a member or a new attendee, and the name on that is Erin. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. My name is Erin. I'm a planner with JL Richards. So for those of you I haven't met at planning committee meetings, and we've been providing some additional planning services support to the township for the past few months. So I'll be speaking for some of these applications today.
Okay, and I'm sure you've heard our introduction, so I won't go through the procedural description for you. And I also see Sarah Varro.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. My name is Sarah Varro, and I'm an associate and senior planner with JL Richards and Associates Limited, and working with Aaron and Brad at reviewing the reports that you have before you at committee today. Okay,
thank you for joining us. So if that is everyone, I will, we are reviewing a minor variance application A21-09 for 188 Lodge Road. And whoever is representing our planning department, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, committee. This one's on me. So I'm just going to share my screen. So let me know when you can see. Oh, never mind. The host has disabled my screen sharing abilities. So.
And Erin, what is your last name, Erin?
Reed.
Thank you.
So sorry, Brad or Mercia. I'm trying to share my screen.
You should be good to go now.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Okay. So can I get a thumbs up if people can see my screen?
Yep.
Great. All right, so we're looking at minor variance application A21-09. So the applicants are Lisa Mary Fawcett and David Fawcett, and they have their agents Michael Dupree with a draft and Victoria Lemire with Morgan Planning and Development. I do believe that Victoria is also here this morning and will be speaking following my presentation on the application. So the address is 188 Lodge Road, and the purpose of this application is to recognize existing setbacks on the property and to permit the construction of an upper deck. So the lot is currently occupied by a single detached dwelling. There are stairs on either side of the property to access the shoreline. There's a greenhouse and there are 2 wooden sheds on the lot. One of the sheds and the greenhouse are partially located within the road allowance. So this is just an overview of the variances being sought. So to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 16 meters to 8.21 meters. That's what's being proposed. That's what is existing. So there's no change. It's just to recognize that. That is a difference of 7.79 meters from what is required. They're also looking to reduce the minimum rear yard setback. So 10 meters is required and 8.87 meters is what is existing and what is being sought. And that is a difference of 1.13 meters. And then lastly, they are looking to increase the maximum lot coverage. So 10% is what is permitted on the lot. Presently, they're at a lot coverage of 29.2%. They're looking to increase that by 2.7% to 31.9%, and that is to allow for an upper deck, sorry. So this is just some location maps to show where the existing property is. So you can see Port Severn kind of to the southwest, and then just the lot at the end of the peninsula. This roughly shows the property where the upper deck is proposed is highlighted in red. Here is a survey of the property. So can you see my mouse over the screen?
Yes.
No. Yes. Okay, so this is the water side here. And this is the road allowance. You can see that the greenhouse is just partially located in the road allowance at the top right. And then the wooden shed is at the bottom right, and again, partially in the road allowance. And then you can see where the proposed deck is going to be. Here is a site plan, which again shows everything a little bit clearer. There's a lower deck that's already attached and on the lower part of the house, which does extend towards the water more so than what's being proposed. That is existing, that's what's being recognized, but I just do want to highlight that the proposed upper deck doesn't encroach further into the front yard. And this here's some elevations, drawings. And then just here are some site photos. So you can see that there is quite a bit of a slope at the front end of the property, or the shoreline side of the property. And then again, just highlighted in red is where they are proposing to put the deck. So we are recommending approval on this application subject to some conditions. When we were looking and examining the various aspects of this property, ultimately we found that their opportunities for development is quite limited on the site due to the size of the lot and due to the topography of the lot. The proposed upper deck, it's not anticipated to impact any further vegetation on the property, as it will be seated up and not on the ground. And through this minor variance application process, there is opportunity for the municipality to fix up the lot and bring all of the buildings and structures fully onto the property. So this is what we're trying to recognize through some of the conditions, to just fix up everything, bring it into conformity. And then we're also applying a condition of site plan approval, which would ensure that the site is developed based off what was provided to the committee today. After reviewing the applicable policy and applying the 4 tests, we do believe that the proposed application meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act. So I am going to just go over some of the conditions that I do want to highlight. So condition E is that all accessory structures located within the municipal road allowance be removed from the municipal road allowance, either be removed or be located onto the property. And again, this is just to ensure that everything is on their property. Another one is condition C, which is that the approved lot coverage be in relation to the proposed upper deck and lot area at the date the decision of the Committee of Adjustment was determined. So the applicant has noted that they are in the process of potentially trying to acquire the road allowance. If they are successful with this, ultimately their lot area would increase. So the percentage of coverage would then decrease. So if we approve a 31.9% lot coverage, if they get the road allowance, it wouldn't be that, it would be slightly lower. So just to make sure that lot coverage is based off what the lot area is now, and if they were to get the road allowance, it doesn't increase further. We are just wanted to make that clear with this condition. Also, an environmental pre-consultation was completed by Hutchinson Environmental Science Limited, as the lot is located within 120 meters of type 1 fish habitat. They did advise that a fish impact assessment is not required for this proposed development, but they did note that because the upper deck will be within 8 meters of the water's edge, there's potential for some construction-related sedimentation to impact the aquatic life of Little Lake. So they did recommend an erosion and sediment control plan be prepared by a certified inspector of erosion and sediment control to mitigate these impacts, and we included that as a recommended condition as well. We did also get some comments from risk management staff who ultimately found that they have no concerns with the proposed development. And we did receive comments from Morgan Planning and Development regarding some revisions to condition E, which was the relocation of the structures partially in the road allowance. So Victoria from Morgan Planning and Development is here today, and I'll let her dive into that one a little bit further. But that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions at this time or pass it over to Victoria.
Okay, thank you very much, Erin. I would ask our Secretary Treasurer if we've had any correspondence on this application.
One letter of support was received from Randy and Karen Whaley. 3 letters of no objection were received from Tony and Virginia Rotella, the Trent Severn Waterway, and the Severn Sound Environmental Association.
Okay, thank you very much. Is the applicant present in the meeting?
Yeah, I'm present, and I see Victoria's there as well.
Okay.
I think I'll let Victoria go with it.
Hello.
Well, we got a lot of feedback coming there. Victoria, you may have 2 sources of input.
I think that was
yeah. Lisa, I think was trying to join on 2 devices, so hopefully they've been able to mute one.
Could you please identify yourself, Ms. Lemieux, for the committee, so we know who you are?
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody. For members of the public, my name is Victoria Lemieux, and I'm a senior planner with Morgan Planning and Development, representing Lisa and Dave Fawcett on this application.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything to add to the planner's comments, Ms. Lemieux?
I would like to, if Sydney or Brad wouldn't mind making me a co-host, I'll just share my screen. I'll be brief in my comments because Erin did a great job diving into the overall application. Here we go. Can the committee see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Great, thanks. So again, I won't go deep into the general details of the application because staff have already done so. So I will jump into the overall proposal concept, and the visual on the screen here for the committee is really just kind of what framed my opinion on the application and how I was able to walk through the proposal and justify it from a planning perspective. So just to quickly point out, as Erin mentioned, the 3 key pieces of this application relate to the front yard setback for a deck, the rear yard setback of a deck here, and then also the total lot coverage. So as you can see on the screen, I'm going to move all the faces over here because I can't see my own screen. As you can see on the screen, Lodge Road itself, the traveled area is located here as identified on this survey plan. But there is this road allowance portion, and it does go pretty much the entire length of Lodge Road. However, to the south here, the subject land's owner to the south has since purchased their portion of the road allowance, but the rest of the road allowance does go all the way up Lodge Road. And for members of the committee that may have actually attended the site, when you're visually on the site, you notice that the road allowance, this area actually essentially functions as the rear yard setback for this property. So it's one of those items, and Erin and I had a great discussion about that as well, is when you actually go to the site, you can actually visually understand a lot better what's going on. So this area currently is used for the main driveway access to the property, as well as a grassed recreational area for the owners. So the big pieces here are the front setback, of course. Typically, as members of the committee understand, the front yard setback for a deck is required to be 16 meters, which is 4 meters of an encroachment into the rear yard setback. However, as you can see with this property, the dwelling itself is about 13 meters from the water as existing. So there's really no way possible to meet the front yard setback regardless. But, in this character of the area, dwellings along Bonneville Road, which are across from the subject lands, as well as properties to the south and the north, most properties in this area don't meet the required 20-meter front yard setback. So this is, in general character of the area. And then with the rear yard setback here, as you can see, The number that we are asking to be recognized through this application really is the setback to the ownership line. However, of course, the functional setback, oh, I put it to the dwelling, I meant to put it to the deck here, but the functional setback of the rear yard is well beyond that from what actually goes to the road. And of course, that's the general intent of what a typical rear yard setback is. So again, this is more of a technical application here of a rear yard setback. And then of course, as Aaron mentioned, the lot coverage. So the existing lot coverage of the site is, of course, it's about 29.2%, which is typically higher than what we see in the township. Again, however, this area of the township is quite normal to be in the 20s and 30s of lot coverage percentage. And as you can tell, in the surrounding photos, which I'll show in a few slides, that level of lot coverage, again, is not anything that sticks out in any way. And to be frank, this property has probably one of the most modest dwellings that we see in this area. So I will just jump to, okay, so here is the proposed layout just in a bit more detail. So I just wanted to highlight that it does look bigger on the site plan than it is actually in person, but essentially the extent of the deck that's being proposed is about 10 feet wide along the side of the dwelling and then 10 feet along the front. And this is just to provide better functionality when it comes to, an appropriate dining area, being able to age in place for the owners to be able to maybe, take out a wheelchair, things like that, just make the deck a lot more functional. And given that I've heard that there are a number of very tall people in the family, so a typical 6-foot deck that maybe would work for me from a length perspective when sitting in a nice Muskoka chair definitely would not work for them. So that was the rationale between the 10-foot wide deck. So some additional photos, again, Aaron showed some already, but this is a view of the dwelling from the water. Again, as you can see, the main floor of the dwelling is located up above due to the slope of the property. So what this deck will functionally do is just allow the deck to be accessed from the main floor. So I did want to just highlight the subject lands across the water. So as you can see here, these are dwellings that are located along Bonneville Road. That of course are located relatively close to the water. They have grassed open areas in their front yard. And also they have, a number of accessory boathouse structures on the water. And then these photos, again, just trying to point out this issue with this road allowance on this property. So as you can see here on the photo on the left, Lodge Road is a traveled municipal road. However, as you can see, mature vegetation does exist on the road allowance on either side of the road. And functionally, the road allowance part is located here where, again, the owners have this great large mature vegetation that blocks the visual from the road, which is fantastic. But this is actually area that is located on the road allowance. So it does functionally provide some challenges when it comes to the zoning bylaw. So I'm hopeful that some members of the committee were able to visit the site. So as Aaron mentioned, and I did send some correspondence to be circulated to the committee regarding one of the conditions. So the two structures I wanted to highlight just in the photos in regards to the condition modification we're requesting. So this is the shed that we are discussing, which is partially on the road allowance. So the road allowance line essentially cuts through the shed. So this entire area here is considered road allowance. But obviously, as you can understand as a committee who all have, secondary dwellings in this area, recreational, storage for garden and lawn tools, things like that is very important on these sites to make sure that that storage just isn't hanging out anywhere else. So this shed does provide a lot of function and storage purposes for the owners. And from looking at the rear of the shed, as you can see here, this is the neighbor's property, and this is actually a shed of the neighbors as well that provides some issue with if we were to move the shed back, we wouldn't be able to move it because of the neighbor's shed that is located here, as well as a portion of the septic area is in this area. So really we'd be moving the shed closer to the septic, which as members of the committee know, that would not be an ideal situation. So then just moving to this photo, and then this photo is of the shed again, but from the driveway. So as you can see, you can't even see the shed from the driveway area. And then this is that lovely greenhouse that I'm sure some of you saw when you drove up to the property. Again, a portion of this greenhouse is located on the right of way, as well as this structure on the neighbor's property as well. So of course, the application was reviewed, and again, I won't get into detail because Aaron did touch on the policy perspective, but it was reviewed against the provincial policy statement, the district official plan, the township official plan, and zoning bylaw for the 4 tests. We do believe that the application does in fact meet the 4 tests required for a minor variance. And again, just to highlight this modified condition, what we're really asking for, so there is an existing license of occupation for this subject lands for a portion of the septic system. So this license of occupation was executed in 1997 and is still in place. What we are asking the committee to consider is modifying condition E to allow for that license of occupation to be modified with work with the clerk's department to include the shed and the greenhouse into the agreement. So essentially what this will do is it will take away any responsibility or liability for the township by including it into the license of occupation agreement. That way the owners would be able to maintain the structures on site, as of course they do provide some great functional purpose when it comes to storage in the shed. And also the greenhouse from a lifestyle and health perspective. The owners love to garden, as I'm sure you could see in the photos. And so they are hoping to maintain those structures. We have had a preliminary discussion with the township clerk's department who see no concerns with this approach. And also we did confirm that if the township at any time did want to revoke a license of occupation, as they can for any license of occupation, that is possible. So us asking for this, this relief through this method doesn't take away the ability for the township to ever use that portion of the road allowance again. It just allows in the interim for this to occur. Again, it's unlikely, as you could see from Lodge Road, the photos of Lodge Road, that the township would ever, in fact, take those areas over. But again, you can never say never when it comes to the township needs and requirements. But again, just going back to these photos, the traveled road of Lodge Road seems to service this area appropriately. And, an expansion of that area is likely not going to happen in the future. So that's the extent of my presentation. The owners are here as well as, of course, Mike Dupuis and John White, as well as their contractor. If you have any questions from or I'll stop sharing my screen here so I can see everybody. If you have any questions from a building perspective of the actual deck and construction, things like that. So we're all here for your questions, as well as anything that members of the public may have. So thank you for your time and looking forward to everybody's questions. Thanks.
You're muted, Chair Hill.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you for that visual presentation. I think it addressed some of the questions that we had as well. I noticed there are other people in attendance here. Is there anyone else that would like to comment on this application? Okay. Mr. Dupuis?
Yes. My name is Mike Dupuis and work for A-Draft, and I'm doing the architectural portion of this project. One of the items that came up in discussion was the concern of construction in proximity to the water's edge. But the construction of that deck in terms of silt and erosion and such would be fairly minimal, because it would be, we haven't worked it out yet, but I'm guessing 4 to 5 piers along the waterside edge of that deck. And that would be the only real impact to the soil and and surrounding areas. So other than somebody throwing wood into the water, I don't see there's going to be a whole lot of concern or potential problems with foreign materials finding their way down to the water. Other than that, I think Victoria and the staff covered most of the other items on there. So I think I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Dupuis. I see that we have the applicant in attendance as well. Is there anything that you would like to add to the comments that have been presented so far?
Thank you for seeing this. Really, I just want to thank the members of the committee for being able to come out and view the property and understanding some of the challenges that we face with the slope of the land. And just, thank everybody who's been a part of this to help this process through. And also our neighbors all around who have given verbal support, as well as our neighbors who have also written in letters for support. So I just like to thank them for that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. If there are no other members of the public that wish to address this application, I'll close the public section and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with member Demkew. Maybe Mr. Demkew is going to be calling in. All right, we'll come back to member Demkew and we'll go to member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did have the privilege of visiting the site. The slope to the water presents a challenge, to say the least, I'm sure. I guess more my concern is the proposal to change I believe it was condition E in the motion. And also the comment that the applicant are intending to buy the road allowance. So if they bought the road allowance, would that not eliminate the additional condition to E? And if not, I'd also like to hear from staff as to their thoughts about the added condition in section E.
Thank you, member Matthews. I see Ms. Lemieux with her hand up, and Ms. Lemieux, perhaps you can address I can see that question coming. I had the same question as to the timing of this purchase of the road allowance, and whether that would have any impact on the necessity of moving those buildings now. So perhaps you could address that for us.
Thank you, Chair, and to member Matthews. So the intent behind the approach of a license of occupation really stems in the ability to amend a license of occupation is a process that, and I have spoken with the clerk about this, and she did confirm this for me, that that is a much quicker process than the process for potentially actually purchasing the road allowance. As some members here of council can understand, a process to purchase a road allowance can be a 6-month, 8-month, 12-month process at times. So by at least in the interim, recognizing the structures through a license of occupation process that can potentially happen between 1 to 2 months, this won't impact the building season for the applicants first thing in the spring to get this moving, or later in the fall if they can even make it, depending on the weather. But your comment is correct that if they do the license of occupation and recognize these structures, but then still purchase the road allowance in a year, if the township does deem it to be appropriate to sell, because that is also a piece here that we are unsure of that yet. Once they do that, the license of occupation essentially ceases to exist in nature. So this is just kind of a preemptive way to take away the liability from the township as quickly as we can, while still respecting their ability to hopefully build this sooner than later. Whereas if we wait until they purchase the road allowance, that could push them another year. So this is just being, mindful of timing and from a process perspective. So hopefully that clears that up for you, Member Matthews.
It does somewhat. I'd still, if I may, Mr. Chair, like to hear from staff as to their thought on this, not to demean any comments from Ms. Lemieux, because she's very knowledgeable, but I would just like to hear staff as well.
So Aaron, are you able to respond to that?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Matthews. I would just reiterate what Victoria said. We've discussed this ourselves quite thoroughly, and we do want to recognize these structures, and we do want to ensure that the township is not liable for anything that were to occur in the road allowance. So our initial thoughts are to move the buildings, and through a compromise by putting in this agreement in place, we are supportive of the change that that she is requesting for this condition.
Thank you to the both of you.
Thank you very much. Member Ferguson.
Well, I also had the opportunity to view the property, and Member Matthews is quite correct. There's a huge, very steep slope to the back. I do not think that the new upper deck is going to have a significant impact on the visual impact at all of the cottage. And I believe that the license of occupation is certainly an excellent short-term, hopefully, move to allow them to move ahead pending their ability to purchase the road allowance, if possible, from the township. And as a result, I am in favor of this application.
Thank you, Member Ferguson. Member Kutsier.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I can certainly appreciate the applicant's wish to have the deck at the same level as our main floor. And I can also appreciate the license of occupancy would be very expedient in that, the road allowance, I think, would probably at the very least require a survey to peg where it would be. And before it even gets debated as to whether the township wants to sell a portion of the road allowance. And we know that those things take a little more time than you'd hope. But I'm afraid I have a couple of questions. And in regards the plans that A-Draft have prepared, and I can't help but notice on them that not only does the pattern of the main floor seem slightly different than what I'm seeing from the overhead photographs, like I don't see what I would call the rear entrance bump out, but they refer to a proposed addition. And if I'm understanding things correctly, what they're referring to as the proposed addition is actually the new, I'll call it new, I don't know how old it is, sunroom at the front. At least that's what it looks like to me, because there seem to be a lot of windows. And unfortunately, my schedule this week was so busy, I was not able to attend to site. But when was that sunroom built? Is my first question.
All right, let's take them one at a time. And I see Mr. Dupuy is recognizing that question, and perhaps you can provide us with an answer.
Certainly. The sunroom on the water side is, at the beginning of the application process, was labeled as new construction. Technically, it is new construction because the old is being removed and this will be new. The reality of it is the new construction is going back on the exact same footprint as the old construction. So it's probably more accurate to say it's being repaired or replaced. We've had a number of discussions with staff on the wording, and things have been corrected along the way. I believe there was a comment about the rear entrance on the roadside. It is also actually shown on the plans as it is on the survey as well. So things are matching up. Pardon me. And in terms of there's the decks on the water side, and I think it was previously mentioned before, the existing decks are there at a lower level. The new deck being proposed is at an upper level and is further away from the water than the existing ones. As well, there's the deck on the side. If I'm standing at the water looking at it, it would be on the right-hand side. The existing deck would be removed and the new deck wraps around and occupies more or less the same footprint, getting a few feet closer to the road than the existing. Hopefully that helps clarify some of that anyway.
Well, I will admit feeling much better that you're putting the improved bump out, if I can call it that, on the same footprint that existed before. Because of course, then my next question would have been, well, why wasn't there a plan approval for that given lot coverage? But clearly, if you're about the same footprint, that's not necessary. So I appreciate that explanation. And I think what I heard from you, which I'm not sure was clear to me before, is that the lower deck is actually being removed. Is that what you? No.
No.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood.
It remains if you're looking down at it like from a bird's eye point of view, there will be no deck getting any closer to the water than what's currently there now, regardless of the level.
Okay. No, well, I appreciate the clarifications because that's addressed one of the concerns I had when I reviewed the file. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Kuchar. Member Cato.
Yeah, I have no problems with this. The only question I had was about the lower deck, but Member Koicher just kind of asked that question for me. And I know the area quite well, worked on either side of this property a number of times, and I'm in support of this.
Thank you, Member Cato. Member Jarvis.
Yeah, for the most part, I don't have any objections. I am still a little confused over this road allowance, so I have no issue with the frontage on the lake. My issue is with the structures that are currently imposing on the road allowance. I understand Victoria's proposal for the license of occupation with the intent to purchase. Should that be something the municipality is in favor of? So I guess my question is with regards to sequence of events. I understand the license of occupation, but I'm wondering how we can, and maybe Aaron can help out here. How do we set things up so that there's a condition that everything be looked at with regards to the option to purchase the road allowance? I don't want to impose, I don't want to stop things while we figure this out, but I'm a bit confused as to how we could move things along on the one hand, but at the same time make it I guess a sort of requirement that the owners purchase that road allowance should it be acceptable to the municipality.
Aaron, are you able to respond to that?
Thank you. Through the chair to you, Member Jarvis. I'll try my best. I'm still getting acquainted with township processes, but through Victoria's proposal for the license of occupation, that would be implemented, I believe, through the clerk's department. And then between conversations, I believe, with Public Works regarding road allowance, should that come into play, then the license of occupation would no longer be in place. But perhaps Brad or Victoria could elaborate on that further.
I think we're fairly clear on that, but if anyone else needs a refresher on what the proposal is there, please raise your hand and we'll ask Victoria to respond.
I wouldn't mind having Brad's interpretation of things, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Maybe.
Brad is not representing the application.
Maybe I could just provide a brief response. So there's we've identified those two encroachments that are coming into the road allowance through this application. And because that's been identified, we want to address those through the application. So initially, the condition was that they be removed. Obviously, we've seen those structures and the applicant would like to keep them in the place that they're in right now. So in order to do that, like Victoria was saying, in the short term, that's why the condition has been proposed to be revised to allow the township to permit those encroachments through the amendment of that license of occupation. So that allows them to go forward, meet their conditions of the variance, move forward with the deck and allow for those encroachments in the short term. And then if, again, the township is amenable to selling part of the road allowance in the longer term, then the applicants are able to pursue that, and it doesn't have any impact on the timing of the construction of their deck and the approval of this application. So that amendment to allow for the amendment to the license of occupation through the amendment that's being proposed by the applicant, we think that that is suitable to address those issues of the encroachment. Hopefully that answered your question, or if there's any follow-up, please advise.
Your indulgence, Mr. Chair, if it's all right. I guess what we're doing is we're allowing something to happen and with a sort of understanding that something else may happen down the road, but it may not happen. So the license of agreement, I gather there's no charge for a license of occupation. There is a cost for shore road allowance purchase, I presume. So there's a cost differential that's significantly in favor of the owners of the property for the license of occupation versus the road allowance purchase. I think I've got that right. Just nod your head, Victoria, if I'm close. Or you can.
I don't think that was the case, and I can see Victoria's anxious to put a condensed version of this before us again.
Okay, Victoria, go ahead.
Through you, Chair to Member Jarvis, you are partially correct. Of course, a purchase of a road allowance, you're looking at multiple thousands of dollars for sure, which of course would go to the township for other needs. The license of occupation does have a administrative fee initially of $350 and then a $200 a year upkeep charge. But I guess really the key point of this too that I want to stress is the township at any time can revoke this license of occupation. There is a clause in there that if there really does ever become, these structures have been here for a long time, so has the adjacent property structures that also encroach. If the township does in fact find that there is a concern with the encroachment, that it's impeding the ability to maintain the road, anything of that sort, it can be revoked. And that's where, if we were, to your question before, if we were to impose a condition, or sorry, if the township, I still think of we sometimes, sorry, if the township were to impose a condition to purchase the road allowance, if in fact that wasn't possible, let's say the operations department didn't agree, then it would completely stop up all this construction for a year plus and they'd have to come back. So we are absolutely respectful of the fact that the encroachment exists, like Sarah mentioned, and we feel as this is as best solution as we can, but also having regard for the ownership's needs for the deck. So hopefully that clarifies.
I'm not finished, I'm afraid, Mr. Chair. Is that all right? This is
yes. Are you still on the same question, Member Jarvis?
Absolutely. Is it possible to then put in as part of that requirement an E that the road purchase be made if it is acceptable to both, acceptable to the township? Like it has to happen if the township's agreeable.
I think the way your question is structured, it would be very difficult to reply. Just in brief, Mr. Member Jarvis says, we have a condition there that will cover off leaving the structures remaining and with no liability to the town. That seems to be pretty acceptable to everyone. The future desire of the applicant to purchase that property really isn't necessary to come into question for the purpose of this application. So that's sort of where we're at. If everybody's comfortable with expanding the license of occupation, I think we're good to go forward.
I'll leave it. Okay.
Okay, and I noticed Member Demkew has joined us. And do you have any comments, or would you like to try and make a comment, Mr. Demkew?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey. Major computer failure. Anyway, I missed most of the conversation, but when I did visit that site, and I didn't see any major issues in my mind. So I'll go with the consensus of the group. I was prepared to say go ahead with this.
Thank you, Member Demkew. And with that, we've received comment from and responses from everyone. I have a motion in front of me, actually moved by Member Jarvis and seconded. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A21-09 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 188 Lodge Road to permit the expansion of an existing deck from a reduced front yard setback of 8.21 meters, reduced rear yard setback of 8.87 meters, and an increased lot coverage of 31.9%, subject to the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes are paid to date. B, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And C, that the approved lot coverage be in relation to the proposed upper deck and lot area at the date of decision of the Committee of Adjustment was determined. D, and that a sediment control plan be prepared by a certified inspector of erosion and sediment control. E, that the accessory structures located within the municipal road allowance be removed from the public road allowance. And I think we're going to modify that condition as noted in the comments earlier to take into consideration that a modification to the license of occupation would be required as well. So we'll have the Secretary Treasurer make that comment. And finally, or make that adjustment rather, that the approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. Oh, and just in front of you, you can see that our Secretary Treasurer has already made that amendment, and I will read that to say that in addition to subject to that, a revision to the existing license of occupation is be executed to include such structures to the satisfaction of the township's clerk's department. So that will be part of this decision. So having read that, I would ask all those in favor to please signify by raising their hand. Thank you very much. The motion is carried.
Good to see you, Victoria.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we will move to our next applicant and just give everyone a little time to get connected. Aaron, are you with us again for this application?
Yes, I'll be presenting this application as well.
Okay, and I guess you can see as a co-host whether or not all of the parties to this application are in attendance or not. It looks like we're okay.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, to my knowledge, there's no one else speaking on behalf of this application today.
Oh, okay. Then our next application is A21-16 for 21 Links Trail. And to you, Ms. Reed.
Thank you. So again, I have the presentation up on the screen and everyone can see it. Yep. Great. So we are looking at minor variance application A21-16. So this was submitted by Gerald Campbell. They have the agent Dupuy Ouellette Incorporated. The address is 21 Links Trail, and the purpose of this minor variance is to facilitate the construction of a sunroom over an existing deck, and then also to reconfigure the deck. So the variances that are being sought is to increase the maximum lot coverage. So 40% is what is permitted. What is being proposed is to increase it up to 63%. So that is a difference of 23%. To reduce the minimum rear yard setback. So 7.5 meters is what is required. 3.4 meters is what is being proposed. So that would reduce it by 4.1. The math is wrong there, but oh yeah, no, 4.1 meters. And then lastly, to reduce the interior side yard setback. So 2 meters is what is required. They're proposing a 0.1 meter setback, so a difference of 1.9 meters. The site is currently occupied by a townhouse and a deck. And for context, it abuts the Oak Bay Golf Club. It is also part of the first phase of the Oak Bay subdivision development. So here is just the location map to show where the property is. This is again just an aerial image highlighted in red. There is the approximate location of where the sunroom and the deck would be. And here is the site plan for the property. Some plans and elevation. Some site photos. So as you can see on the site photos, there's an existing deck that is there. Through the construction of the sunroom, the deck will be reconfigured and they'll be getting pushed out a little bit. You can see on the second image that the neighbors on either side of this one already have decks as well that encroach much further into the rear yard and are larger, and that goes for both sides. You can see the one a little further back you can see that it extends further a little bit clearer, but that one that's closer to the front of the picture also extends further than the existing deck. So staff are recommending approval for this application subject to recommended conditions. When we were looking at the various policy and putting this against the 4 tests under the Planning Act, we ultimately found that what's being proposed, it does maintain the character of the neighborhood. It aligns with the visual characteristics of the area from the street line. It would not be, you wouldn't notice what's being proposed. From the rear yard, as seen in the site photos, it's fairly common for these townhomes to have larger decks in the rear yard. In this plan of subdivision as well, the lots are smaller than what is the average in for residential lots throughout the township. So increasing the lot coverage, reducing some of these setbacks, that's something that's fairly common in this area and does align with the character of this subdivision. They're also proposing railings to provide some privacy for the abutting land uses, for the landowner itself, and then also from the golf course at the rear. So planning staff, again, we are in the opinion that the subject application does conform and does not conflict with any of the applicable planning policy documents and meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. So these are the conditions that we have proposed, just that taxes be paid, that the variance be fixed to the subject site plan that was provided, and that approval of the variance does expire within 3 years from the date of decision. So that concludes my presentation, and I can answer questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reed. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence in this application?
No correspondence has been received.
Okay, and I see that we have no, we do have Sean Ouellette in attendance. And Mr. Ouellette, did you have any comments that you'd like to add to Ms. Reed's presentation?
Yes, I thank the staff for a good presentation. I just want to add a couple things. I know they're in support, and I know this meetings have gone long, so I'll be very brief. The actual lot coverage, current lot coverage is actually 58%. We're only adding 100 square feet of deck and putting a sunroom on top of the existing deck. So it's not a huge increase there. And we have done probably some of those pictures you saw, we've done already through minor variances, et cetera. This is this area that, you know, minor variance has been applied for lots of extra lot coverage. So I think what was been proposed is as Aaron says, is fitting with the neighborhood, and I'll leave it at that.
Very good. Thank you very much. If there are no other members of the public present, I will close the public section and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comment. And we'll begin with Member Caddo.
Yeah, I think this is fairly modest. One of the pictures, the farther away condo unit, let's say, looks like they have a sunroom on. It's kind of hard to tell from the picture, but or some kind of gazebo, I guess. Anyways, doesn't look like it's a big problem, and I'm okay with this.
Thank you very much. Member Demke?
Yes, I did visit this site, and it'll actually line up with just about everybody else in that row. So I have no issues at all with this.
Okay, thank you. Member Matthews?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Mr. Demke. I think this applicant's probably the only one that doesn't have a sunroom on it. I'm also led to believe that Oak Bay has now made this almost standard to put sunrooms on as they move forward. So I have no problem with this.
Thank you very much. Member Ferguson?
I agree with previous comments. It does back onto a hole on the golf course. So there's quite a green belt behind the property. And so there is no neighbor to the rear. So it actually makes a great deal of sense. And I agree completely.
Thank you, Member Ferguson. Member Couture?
No issues whatsoever. It's quite consistent with the neighbors. And so I think that's just fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Jarvis?
Yeah, I have no concerns.
Thank you. Having said that, I have a motion before me, moved by Member Matthews and seconded. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A21-16 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 21 Links Trail to permit an addition to an existing townhouse with a minimum lot coverage of 63% minimum rear yard setback of 3.4 meters, and minimum interior side yard setback of 0.1 meters, subject to the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes are paid to date. B, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And C, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you very much. The application is approved and motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. Okay, and we will see if there are any additional attendees to this application. Our next application will be A21-17 for 350 Birch Acres Drive. How are we looking, Brad? Is everybody in attendance?
Yes, those who have registered are here, so I can.
Okay, then over to you, Brad, for your presentation on A21-17.
Okay, if I could just get a thumbs up if the presentation's there. Perfect, thank you. All right, so our next public meeting this morning is for minor variance application A21-17 for Sheelane Properties Incorporated. The agent on file is Flow Drawings and Design, care of Victoria Hoffman. And the lands are located at 350 Birch Acres Drive within the Honey Harbor community. So an overview of the application is that it does propose to facilitate the reconstruction of an existing dwelling with while constructing an addition at the same time. The addition would not further reduce the existing front yard setback. There is a provincially significant wetland located within 120 meters of the subject lands, and in accordance with the township's official plan, there was an environmental impact assessment prepared and submitted with the application, which was subsequently peer reviewed by the township's environmental consultant. So there are two minor variances that are requested through this application. The first being a reduced front yard setback of 11.9 meters, where 20 meters is required. This is essentially to recognize the existing front yard setback of the dwelling to facilitate the reconstruction and addition, as well as a reduced front yard setback to an attached deck that would go off the front of the proposed dwelling, which is actually an improvement over the setback of the existing deck. So the existing is set back approximately 7 meters from the high water mark, whereas the proposed deck would be set back about 8.2 meters. So here we have a location map of the subject property. It is located on South Bay, right at the end of Birch Acres Drive, or sorry, near the end of Birch Acres Drive, within the Honey Harbor community. The surrounding land uses are mostly shoreline residential properties, but there is some crown land here to the rear. The 2018 aerial imagery, so you can see the existing dwelling here. And these are the lands that were commented on through the environmental assessment due to their proximity to the provincially significant wetland here at the rear. It is agreed that through the environmental assessment that these lands will remain undeveloped and in their natural state. It is recommended that that be accomplished through the site plan agreement, so these will be recognized as remaining undeveloped. A screenshot of the survey that was provided, so you can see the existing dwelling located in this area here. So the proposed dwelling would maintain the same setback over on this corner. However, they are proposing to push it back from the water a little bit on this end, as well as constructing the addition out towards the rear here.
Brad, I don't think we're seeing your mouse on here. At least I'm not.
Oh, sorry. You see it now?
Oh, yes, there you go.
So you can see the existing dwelling located here with the hatching. Through the reconstruction and addition, they would be pushing this end of the dwelling back further from the water and constructing the addition here with the new proposed attached garage. A new septic system is also proposed to be installed on the property. And due to the site constraints, it is recommended that this be the most appropriate location for the septic, which does limit the applicant's ability to slide that dwelling back much further. So here we have the elevations of the proposed dwelling. Due to its proximity to the high water mark, the applicant has designed it to maintain a low profile, being only 1 story in height. So it does comply with the maximum building height for the zone. So just a brief overview of the staff report that was prepared with the application. Staff are recommending approval subject to the recommended conditions. The opportunities for compliance are limited due to the constraints related to the location of the proposed septic system. They are proposing to utilize an existing cleared area, so it does minimize any further vegetation disturbance on site. By minimizing the height of the proposed dwelling to further reduce any visual impacts, as well as it has the ability to implement site plan control, so we can ensure the protection and retention of vegetation on site, as well as the preparation of an erosion and sediment control plan, as well as protecting those lands on the opposite side of Birch Acres Drive, as recommended through the environmental assessments. So planning staff are of the opinion that the application conforms to and does not conflict with any of the applicable planning policy documents and does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. So these are the conditions that are recommended by staff, being that taxes are paid, a site plan control application be submitted and approved. The variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, and scale. Any fees that are incurred by the municipality shall be paid for by the applicant, and that approval is granted for 3 years to obtain building permits. So that concludes my presentation. If the committee has any questions, I would be happy to answer. The applicant's agent is also in attendance if there are questions for her. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Madam Secretary, is there any correspondence related to this application?
3 letters of support were received from Sherry and Betty Stoneman, John and Kim White, and Patricia and Murray Sneddon. 1 letter of no objection was received from Veronica Malfara.
Thank you very much. I see we have Victoria in attendance today. Are there any comments that you'd care to add to what our planner submitted already?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Brad has done, like always, a good job presenting it. This application is just to basically, keep in mind the view from the canoe with the single story, also keeping the view from Birch Acres Drive in mind, while also working with the limitations with the right-of-way with the road and the septic and the marsh. One thing to note, and Brad, I don't know if you can pull up that survey again for me. I did just notice one thing. So the existing front yard setback, the closer corner, I don't know, can you do that? Yeah. Yeah, so this one here, so the closer, looking at this page on the, the closer corner of the cottage is actually 10.2. So we are actually pushing the cottage. So the existing front yard setback of the current cottage is 10.2. And then we're working off the opposite corner, the 11.9 meters as like our base point and kind of pivoting the proposed, but the front yard setback is actually being increased, which I think is kind of important to mention to you guys. And then again, the shape of the building was kind of determined by the limitations on the property with the existing building, the existing garage, and the wetland, and then wanting to bring the septic up to today's standards and get a new septic in there that will comply. And then that's kind of, like I said, Brad did a good job presenting everything. I think that front yard setback is kind of important to note. And so both the deck and the dwelling setback is being pushed further from the water. But if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to address them. Okay,
thank you very much. Do we have any other members of the public that wish to add questions or comments to this application? I certainly don't see anyone other than Ms. Huffman online. So seeing none, I will close the public session of this application and bring the matter before committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with Member Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm inclined to be okay with this. I'm always impressed, though. I'm significantly impressed that a cottage would require a 3-car garage, but of course that's a personal opinion on my part, and all that would imply on possible pressures on the septic system. But other than that, I see nothing wrong with this. Good proposal, well set up, and yeah, I appreciate the work that's been done on it. Good to see Victoria again.
You too.
Thank you. Member Kuchar.
Yeah, I don't believe that Councillor Jarvis has a 3-car garage at his cottage, but that's a separate thing. I'm afraid this application, Chair Hill, is making me feel exceptionally old. My family rented this cottage a full half-century ago for the summer. And so that I'm afraid I looked at and I looked at again, and yeah, I was old enough at that time to remember things, so you can start doing your math. But I wasn't old enough to rent it. And that was my family who rented the cottage. Having said that, I can certainly appreciate it's time to update the building, and so I have fond memories of the old building, and I have no objections to this application.
Thank you, Member Kuchar. I did visit the site, and from what I can tell, you were the last people there. There's been no one there since. Member Ferguson.
I just have a quick question. It does appear that there's going to be a new 3-car garage added to the property. And in addition to that, there's a fairly substantial detached garage on the property currently. So, I mean, the combined area of these garages meet all bylaws with respect to such structures?
Question for you, Brad.
Through the chair to Member Ferguson, staff have undertaken a review of that, and the coverage is less than what is permitted in the SR1 zone. I'm kind of recalling something in the back of my mind. Ms. Hoffman may be able to clarify, but there may be some plans for the existing garage. It's going to remain as is. Okay.
The
Yeah.
lot
So the
coverage is
existing garage
5.8 though.
Okay, so it meets all legal requirements to have an exact like 4 bay garages on the property.
Yeah, it still complies with all of those provisions.
That's terrific. Thank you very much. Other than that, I am in support of this application. Certainly the removal of the existing structure will be cause for celebration by many neighbors.
Thank you, Member Ferguson. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a chance to visit it. It's quite interesting. I'm not sure that the trees inside the building holding up the roof were put there by the Kuchar family or not, but and the foundations
They existed at the time.
The foundations are crippling, and so I just have a comment, I guess. When I read the application, it says to facilitate the reconstruction of a portion of the existing dwelling in addition to an existing legal non-conforming. Are they just not going to demolish the whole thing and start all over again? Maybe it's just a nitpicking on wording, but or maybe it's a better planning wording. But at first, when I saw it, I thought, you're not really going to try to reconstruct this, are you?
Question to you, Brad.
Yeah,
does it matter if we're rebuilding or restoring?
The way that staff have drafted the approval, it would allow them to essentially demolish everything that's existing and then rebuild the new. They're just hoping to work within a portion of the footprint of the existing. So that's where the word for reconstruction, why it was incorporated into the recommended decisions.
Okay, thank you. I very much appreciate that you're, if anything, you're setting yourself back a little bit further from the water, keeping it at a single story. I think it would be a great improvement to the property.
Thank you, Member Matthews. Member Demke.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I just had a couple of questions. The matching existing wall that's going to go along, I guess, to start, is right up against a huge rock. I don't know, like that seemed a little strange to me when I visited the site. So I'm not sure whether that made a difference or not. But it seems to be the wall is right on that one rock on the, I guess, on the right-hand side where it says match existing wall. But I guess I'm not a contractor or anything like that. So I guess that's okay. It was just more of a comment that I couldn't see why it wouldn't be moved. But I appreciate all the other comments of trying to improve the setbacks. A personal question is, I'm not sure, and I don't know all this stuff, but a proposed septic bed and a proposed septic tank separate. I'm not sure what that means to me. It's a neat clarification. Probably not to everybody else, but I don't know why you'd have two septic. Yes, Brad.
I could clarify that for you. So through the chair to Member Demke, that's a very normal setup for a septic system, is that it has the tank and then it has the bed. So that's just what they're referring to on the survey, is just those two components of the septic system itself.
Oh, it needs, yeah, that's fine. I just never seen one. So I'm okay with this. They've done a pretty good job in trying to keep things. And certainly, I think Member Kuchar probably was the last member to live there. I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Member Demke. Member Caddo.
Yeah, full support. No problems here.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a quick question for you, Brad, is there was discussion, a brief discussion of the PSW, and I don't see that on the drawing. Is the PSW on the other side of the road, or where is it in relation to the new construction?
Correct. So I can bring up the slideshow just to where it is, but it is on the opposite side of the road. So the PSW is located down here. Sorry, down here.
Okay.
On this section, and the proposed dwelling is located up here. So because the development and the property is located within 120 meters of the PSW down here, they did need to complete an environmental study to ensure that there would be no negative impacts to this feature as a result of the proposed development. And through that report, it was recommended that this area remain in a natural, undisturbed state. So that would be conditions that we would impose through the site plan agreement.
Oh, Brad, while you have that drawing on screen, the area that you had on the drawing shown as the future area for the disposal bed is the area that is to the right of that cottage. And if you noticed, the area that you're currently circling and the area to the right of that, which is sort of a dark green, all looks like it's wetland. You know, what's the difference between that wetland and PSW?
So this wetland feature is not identified as a provincially significant wetland. It is identified as a wet area on the property, and the environmental assessment did take this piece into consideration. Due to the location of this feature, that's why the septic system is proposed to go in here, because it could not be located back any further due to that natural constraint. But that feature was recognized and assessed through the environmental study that the applicant did submit, and no negative impacts were proposed or were identified as part of the application.
Okay, thank you. And again, just to further that question a little bit, if you were to fill in that small area of a wet area, does that mean wetland goes away in terms of the application? Like there?
No, it would not. Staff would not encourage that either. We would prefer to see the feature remain as it is and ensure that the development is appropriately set back from that, as proposed through the impact assessment that was prepared.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. If there's no further questions or comments, and I see none, I will read the motion in front of me, moved by Member Caddo and seconded Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A21-17 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 350 Birch Acres Drive to permit a reduced front yard setback of 11.9 meters to the proposed dwelling and a reduced front yard setback of 8.2 meters to an attached deck, subject to the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes are paid to date. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, the preservation of vegetation protection areas within the front yard, and address on-site phosphorus management in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And C, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And D, that all fees and distributions, legal, engineering, planning, if any, incurred by the township with respect to this application shall be paid by the applicant. And E, that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Thank you very much. The application, the motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you.
Nice seeing you.
See you later.
Hi, Victoria.
Our next application is A21-20 for 377 North Shore Road. And Brad, if you could just, oh, I'm sorry, we have Aaron misread with us again. If we have the applicant in attendance and we're ready to proceed. Are they joining us today?
Yes, the applicant is here.
Oh, okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Then we will now review application A21-20 for 377 North Shore Road. To the planner, please.
Thank you. So we do have an application A21-20 from Tom Baskerville. There was no agent on the file. The address is 377 North Shore Road. And the purpose of this application is to facilitate construction of a detached garage. The lot currently has a sleep bunkie and an existing garage, and that existing garage does encroach onto the neighbor's property slightly. It is also prone to flooding. The applicant has acknowledged that they are going to be removing that garage, and we've also included that as one of our recommended conditions for your knowledge. They are also in the process of constructing a new seasonal dwelling.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll just pull up my presentation here. Sorry. All right, here we go. So they're seeking relief from two provisions of the zoning bylaw that come from the general provision section and relate specifically to detached garages. So they're looking to increase the maximum building height from 4.5 meters to 6.1 meters. So that's a difference of 1.6 meters. And then as well to increase the maximum ground floor area from 112 meters squared to 158 meters squared. Here is the location map. Just to show where the property is. We have an aerial imagery. So I've highlighted roughly the area of where the proposed garage will be. And then here is the site plan. So you can see where the proposed seasonal dwelling is going to be located, as well as the garage. You can also see, can you see my mouse on the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so the garage over here is what is going to be removed. Here you can see the elevation drawings of what is being proposed. So it does exceed, as mentioned, the maximum building height permitted for a detached garage. Here's just some site photos of showing roughly where the garage will be placed. Overall, staff are recommending approval of the application subject to recommended conditions. When we evaluated the proposed detached garage against the 4 tests, as well as all of the applicable policy, we did find that the detached garage would remain incidental and subordinate to the principal use of the lot, that being the seasonal dwelling, that it maintains the character of the area and would allow for indoor storage of personal and residential items and would preserve the aesthetic qualities of the property. For any of you who have had the luxury of going to this site, it is a beautiful lot. It's heavily forested. Where the location of the garage would be, it wouldn't be noticed from the shoreline as well. There's no anticipated impacts on any of the abutting neighbors. It does conform to the shoreline residential 1 zone provisions, which was taken into consideration. So when we did evaluate what's being proposed against what the specific provisions for the actual zoning of the lot are, in terms of building height, the SR1 zone has a maximum building height of 8 meters. And again, they're proposing 6.1 meters. So while it doesn't meet the detached garage provisions, it did meet that zone provisions. And then also it is looking at a larger ground floor area than what's permitted for a detached garage. But when we were looking at the overall lot coverage of what was permitted on the site, with everything that is being proposed, it still falls under what the maximum lot coverage is. So I believe 7% lot coverage is permitted in this zone, and should this garage be approved as well, with everything else they have on the lot, it would only cover about 6.1%. So there is still some room there. And then lastly, just that there is some substantial mature vegetation around vegetation surrounds the proposed structure and would mitigate any visual impacts to the neighboring properties. So planning staff are of the opinion that the subject application conforms to and does not conflict with any of the applicable planning policy documents and meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act. We do recommend the following conditions. So I won't go into them in too much detail, but just one that I would like to highlight is condition C, that the environmental pre-consultation fee be paid in full to the township. So because the property is located within 120 meters of fish habitat type 1, we did have an environmental pre-consultation completed by Hutchinson. They identified that no fish habitat assessment is required for the proposed construction of the detached garage. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reed. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence on this application?
No correspondence has been received.
Okay. I noticed that we have Mr. Baskerville in attendance. Is there anything that you would care to add to the presentation by the planner so far?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. No, I think everything that was presented is correct and acceptable to me. I think you've had a chance to see my letter and submission that I think makes all the points I would make here. I won't read it to you. I'll clarify that, and I'm not surprised that Aaron got a little confused. The photo are actually of my neighbor's building site and not where we're putting the garage. Just wanted to clarify that, because from that site you can see the water and so on. Where we're putting the garage, you would not be able to see the water. There's the high point of land, and the new cottage will block any view of the garage from the water, and it also can't be seen from the road because of the bush. The only place you would be able to see the garage from is from the driveway itself as you're entering the property.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baskerville. And I notice there are no members of the public in attendance here, so I'll close the public section of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with Member Demkew.
I have no problems with this. Good presentation, and looks fine to me.
Okay, thank you, Member Demkew. Member Caddo.
Yeah, no problems here. It's going to be well hidden. Not going to be able to, lots of vegetation around. I support it.
Okay, thank you. Member Kuchar.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, given the height of the building, that is a second floor planned for any portion of the building?
Mr. Baskerville, can you answer that?
No, the height of the building is because given that I have to rebuild this garage, I want to build it big enough to store my boat in on my own property. And I need a 15-foot door to do that. So I need 16-foot clear inside. And so that'll preclude any chance to put living space above.
Okay, thank you. It's a mighty big garage, but given its location and everything else, I do not have any objections.
Okay, thank you, Member Kuchar. Member Jarvis.
Well, I am happy to hear he's not parking a helicopter in there. Just points of clarification for Aaron here. So we're seeking relief from a bylaw, even though the variances requested are still within the confines of the SR1 designation, correct?
Thank you through the chair to Member Jarvis. So in the zoning bylaw, there are specific provisions for each zone, but then there's also a general provision section, which kind of applies to all zones. So the provisions that they're seeking relief from are specific to detached garages, which comes from the general provision section. But just when we were looking at whether it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw, one of the questions under the 4 tests from the Planning Act, we were just comparing it against the SR1 zones to see generally would it fit in with that area and fit in with that zone, which we do find that it does meet that intent.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Ferguson.
I'm in complete agreement with this application. I think Mr. Baskerville has done an excellent job locating the garage where it will not be visible from either the water or the roadway. It's once you're in your laneway, as you have stated. And secondly, when we saw your 32-foot boat and the boat lift down at the dock, we thought, yeah, this isn't going to go in anywhere near a conventional garage. So I understand the increased height and size that you require. I'm in favor.
Thank you, Member Ferguson. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with all my fellow members, their comments, and just to reiterate Mr. Ferguson's comment, you do have a lovely boat, Mr. Baskerville, and I understand why you'd want to put it in safekeeping for the winter. So I have no problems with this.
I think we should add a clause that he needs to take us out on Georgian Bay for a run in such a magnificent boat.
I would not object to that.
Everyone in favor of that? Sorry, thank you very much, Member Matthew, for your questions and comments. And I see there are no other, if there are no other questions or comments, I have a motion and it is moved by Member Demkew and seconded. And be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A21-20 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 377 North Shore Road to permit the construction of a new garage with a maximum height of 6.1 meters and a maximum ground floor area of 158 meters squared, subject to the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes are paid to date. B, that the existing garage that encroaches on the abutting northwesterly property be removed. C, that the environmental pre-consultation fee be paid in full by the township to the Township of Georgian Bay. And C, that a site plan control application be submitted and approved and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development, the proposed vegetation, planting areas adjacent to the garage, and implementation of recommendations to the fish habitat assessment, if applicable, in a manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And E, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. The motion is carried and the application is approved. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Baskerville, and good luck with your project.
Thank you all. It's been a crazy project, but I'm really looking forward to having it done, and I appreciate your approval today.
Thank you. And with that, I will mention our next application. And do we have Mr. Horn in attendance? Brad, can you see from your end?
Yes, Mr. Horn and his agent of MHBC Planning are both in attendance. Here, we'll just bring them over.
The planner dude.
Okay.
All right, they are both in attendance now, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. Horn, for your patience today. Sorry to have you at the end of the list, but we're happy to hear your application. The next application we have is application A21-21 for 237 Winding Way. To the planner, please.
If I could just get a thumbs up for the last time today, if we can see it. Perfect.
Okay, good.
All right, so the public meeting for minor variance application A21-21, the applicant is Robert Horn, and their agent is MHBC Planning, care of Jamie Robinson and Jonathan Hogg. The address is 237 Winding Road, located within the 6 Mile Lake waterfront community. And an overview of the application is that it is to facilitate the construction of an addition to a non-complying dwelling. This addition would further reduce the existing front yard setback, meaning that the addition would be closer to the water than what is presently there. And there were no environmental features that required study as part of this application. So there are 2 variances that are requested, the first being a reduced front yard setback of 8.1 meters to the high water mark, where 20 meters is generally required by the SR6 zone. The existing setback presently is 9.4 meters. The second variance that is requested is a variance to allow a further encroachment. So the zoning bylaw would recognize the existing setback of 9.4 meters as being the legal non-complying setback of the dwelling. And the request is to go to a reduced setback of 8.1 meters from the 9.4 that is presently existing. So here we have a location map of the subject property. It is located, as mentioned, on 6 Mile Lake, shown here in the gray hatching. A majority of the properties that surround this are shoreline residential properties. The 2018 aerial imagery, so you can see the property outlined in red here. The existing dwelling located in this area. As discussed throughout the planning reports, there is a large rock outcropping to the side of the dwelling here, which does limit their ability to construct an addition without going closer to the water, as well as due to the shape of the property, the peninsula-like shape. They are limited due to that configuration to construct an addition. So here we have the survey and the site plan that was provided. You can see the existing dwelling, and the applicant has indicated that they did undertake an addition in the 1980s to construct this lighter hatching here. What is proposed through this application is this small addition to the east side of the dwelling located here. It is approximately 70 square feet. And that is what the minor variances relate to. So just in some more detail, we do have the floor plan of the existing dwelling shown here with the proposed 1.5 meter by 4.6 meter addition to the dining room area of the dwelling. So the key points from Development Services Report 2021-72, staff are recommending approval of the application subject to the recommended conditions. The key points are that the opportunities for construction of an addition to the rear are limited due to the rock outcropping located in that area. The proposed resulting dwelling would comply with all of the built form standards for a dwelling on 6 Mile Lake as established in the township's official plan. and the height of the proposed dwelling would be maintained and would not be increased as a result of the proposed addition to maintain and not further any visual impacts due to the proximity to the high water mark. So planning staff are of the opinion that the subject application conforms to and does not conflict with any of the applicable planning policy documents. It does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. We are recommending these conditions here, being the taxes be paid, a site plan agreement, a sediment and erosion control plan, as well as the standard other conditions here, such as fees being paid, and they have 3 years to obtain permits. So that is all I have in terms of a presentation for the committee. The applicant and their agent are also in attendance, and I believe have a presentation as well. But if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oster. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence in this application?
1 letter of no objection was received from Jim and Linda Field.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the applicant or its agent have any additional information they would like to add to the planner's comments? Mr. Polk, you are muted. There you go.
You think I'd have it figured out by now. So my name's Jonathan Pock. I'm here representing Bob Horn, the applicant or the owner of the property. I'm a registered professional planner at MHBC Planning, and we've been working with Mr. Oster on this application. I did have a presentation prepared, but I think Brad covered off most of the main points there and summarized the application. We have reviewed the 4 tests under the Planning Act in the report that was provided for committee's review, and we do believe that it meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act as detailed in that report. I would also note that it is a very minor extension to the dwelling, and it has been limited in scale as much as possible to encroach to the shoreline. And it's really to facilitate a little bit more seating area in the kitchen area, eat-in kitchen area in the dwelling that's existing now without encroaching in other areas of the on the shoreline property. I would ask that committee potentially consider removing the conditions B and C relating to the site plan control and the construction mitigation sediment plan. There will, as part of the application or the construction of the addition to the dwelling, it's fairly flat topography, and there's no anticipated runoff that will occur into 6 Mile Lake. It will be constructed on piers, and there will be no excavation required or heavy equipment being brought into the property. Again, piers are going to be poured, and it's not a very invasive exercise to construct the 5-foot addition to the existing dwelling. So with that, I will leave that for committee's discussion, but if there are any questions, happy to answer as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Polk. Seeing no other members of the public in attendance, we'll close the public session of part of the application and bring the matter before the committee for any questions or comments. And we will begin with Member Demke.
Is Mr. Horn trying to sign in there?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
We can hear you, Mr. Horn.
I don't know. I don't get the video for some reason. I had it earlier. I don't know what happened to it.
Okay, then before we start, I appreciate you just joining us, Mr. Horn. Before we get started with questions and comments from the committee, was there any additional information that you cared to share with us before we proceed any further?
Yeah, Jonathan did a very good explanation along with what Brad had mentioned. It is only a 5-foot extension, and one of the questions raised by one of the members when they were here is why not make it bigger? Are very important to us to maintain the trees and around the surroundings. And we want to make it as least invasive as possible. So a 5-foot extension to the dining room completely unclutters the kitchen dining room area. And that is adequate for what we want. And it does not encroach on the shoreline or anywhere near that. The construction of the piers that Jonathan mentioned is very straightforward. And it's only about 5 inches deep down to the bedrock. So it's not a excavation or anything else. Thank you.
I appreciate you pointing that out and underscoring the fact that this is a 5-foot extension. So with that point being made, I will go back to Member Demkew for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chair Hill. Yes, I did visit the site and I was ready to go ahead with this. I'm not sure whether the removal of these conditions has any kind of a factor or the request for removal. Brad might be able to answer that.
Thank you, Member Demkew. And Brad, I don't see you on here, but I'm sure you're listening. And it probably, as recommended by Member Demkew, it might be of interest for the committee to understand what the planning department's position is on removing item B and C from this application based on the fact that the addition is extremely small and non-invasive. Can you respond to that, Brad?
So to the chair and committee members, the township's official plan does state that all development within the waterfront designation shall proceed by way of site plan control. So that is where the recommendation for that piece came from. Understanding the limited scope of the proposed addition, as well as hearing about the site constraints in terms of how it's going to be constructed and the type of construction being on piers and not actually excavating material there. If the committee was to consider the request from the applicant, it would be my recommendation to maintain condition B. However, condition C could be waived, and as there is already some of those control measures in place in the standard site plan agreement, such as the requirement for the installation of silt fencing or straw bales to further mitigate any potential runoffs. So that would be the recommendation from staff, is that if the committee was to entertain the request from the applicant, condition C, we would request that condition B, be kept.
Okay, and just to further clarify that, Brad, if you don't mind, what is the cost of number B, having a site plan agreement? What would the applicant have to pay in order to make that happen?
So at the time that the applicant made their application, the cost of the site plan control application fee is included in the minor variance fee. However, they would still need to make a $500 legal, there would be a $500 legal fee associated with the preparation of the agreement and having it registered on title. They would also need to prepare a site plan that showed the property boundaries along with the proposed addition and the vegetation on site.
And that site plan, would the applicant be able to do that, or would he have to hire someone professional to do it?
They could likely work off of what has been submitted as part of this application.
Okay, so it's $500 to get that in place. All right, thank you for putting that into perspective for it, and thank you, Member Demkew, for that question. Again, any further questions or comments from Member Matthews, or Member Jarvis, rather?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with our planning department in that I see no reason why we need to have require the sediment control, but this site plan control approval is something we've basically put in everything in the past, and I think it leaves us some further control over any work that's being done there, and I'd like to keep B in as opposed to taking it out But again, I'd be okay with taking C out. I always lament when I see legal non-complying dwellings getting just automatic okays for and recommendations for expansion just because something is limiting expansion in one direction when limitations preclude expansion in another direction. And while I lament that, this is still just a minor, very minor addition in my mind, and I have no problem with that as well. So I'm okay with it, so long as we can keep B in as part of the requirements.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Kuchar.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I do agree that a 5-foot addition is quite minor, though it looks like they're going to lose one mature tree out of that addition. I'm in favor of keeping the site plan control in simply because we're allowing a legal non-complying building to be expanded a little. And I think the site plan control puts restrictions on maintaining vegetation on the rest of the property. And I think that's important, not only for the current owners, who I don't think have any intention of removing any, but any future owners. And I think that having site plan control is a good thing. So I would not be in favor of removing B. And C, construction mitigation sediment control plan. I mean, that can be something very minor and simply saying that there'll be very little is required. So I'm different on C, whether it's maintained or not, because in their case, if there were going to be a sediment control plan, we'd simply say that given the lay of the land, we don't need one. It might be almost that simple, or something to the effect of we're not going to disturb any land more than 7 feet away from the building. But having said that, I'm not going to not approve this if you choose to remove item C, but if you choose to remove condition B, I would be less inclined to approve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Kuchar. And again, Member Brad, if you could clarify for us on number C, where it requires a construction mitigation sediment control plan. Is that something that requires a professional to do that, or as mentioned by Member Kuchar, could you take a written statement from the applicant in order to cover off number C?
Typically, it is requested that the plan be prepared by a certified inspector of erosion and sediment control. That's typically the requirement that staff are looking for when that is included as a condition.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for your comments, Member Kuchar. Member Caddo.
Yeah, I agree. Condition B stay in place, but I do support the application and very, very minor.
Thank you very much. Member Ferguson.
I mirror the comments of the other members that B will likely should stay. C, the mitigation plan we should get rid of. And I know that Mr. Horn, one of the reasons why he hasn't gone any larger was because with only the 5-foot addition, he has to remove one tree. If he went more than that, he'd end up taking out 3 or 4 trees, which he was completely against. So I don't think we have to worry at all about environmental concerns as long as this family is in possession of the property, and I support the application.
Thank you, Member Ferguson. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of the hour, I would just echo the comments of my fellow members.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before we read the motion, Madam Secretary, I think you may have noted during the conversation that there seems to be a tendency to remove number C. Have you made an appropriate adjusted motion, or can we just manually remove letter C as we go forward?
We had one that removed B and C, but not one that just removed C. So I can make them. Oh, go ahead, Brent.
Okay, so you can do that on the fly.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
can do that on my own.
When I read the motion, we will do just that. And we will not require item C. So I have a motion here moved by Member Ferguson and seconded. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A21-21 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 237 Winding Way to permit a reduced front yard setback of 8.1 meters to a 1.5 meter by 4.6 meter addition onto the east wall of the existing dwelling, subject to the following conditions: that municipal taxes are paid to date, and that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that vegetation protection areas within the front yard and address the on-site phosphorus management in manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control, and that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application, and that all fees and disbursements, legal, engineering, planning, if any, incurred by the township with respect to this application shall be paid for by the applicant, and that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the structure. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horn, for waiting so long to have your application heard.
No
Thank you, Chair
problem.
Hill.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chair Hill and members of committee. Have a good day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next item on the agenda is I have another motion before me. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add before we adjourn? Okay, seeing none. I have a motion moved by Member Kuchar and seconded. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment, pardon me, before I do
Bill, I
that,
think you might want to do the minutes, the approval of the minutes before we adjourn.
I was just about to read the part where I'm going to approve the minutes. Are you in agreement with that?
I agree 100% with you, Mr. Chair. That's why you're the chair.
That's what very singularly minded, I have to say we are, aren't we? And it was also moved by Member Kuchar and seconded, be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves the minutes of August 13, 2021 as amended and circulated. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That motion is carried. And I also have a motion that was moved by Member Matthews and seconded. And be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment now adjourns at 12:40 until October 15, 2014 at 10 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor, please raise your hand. The motion is carried. Thank you very much, everyone, and take the rest of the day off.
Thank you.